Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Williamson. The game just ended, so my apologies if there are things that happened, injuries, etc., press conference, etc., that has happened. Of course, we will always cover that tomorrow. I probably will record one Sunday, either before all the kickoffs or between the early slates and the night game with more in-depth coverage. But tough loss, for sure. I gotta say, though, as I was watching football and doing pregame show, and when I got up this morning, I had a doom and gloom feeling about this game, kind of from the start all day. And then reading the inactive list was like, oh, this is even rougher. And then, like, when Porter got hurt, whoa, they just seemed undermanned against a really high quality. I can't stress that enough. I think this is a really good Ravens team that could win the whole Super Bowl, to be honest with you. And I'm going to get this out of the way. I tweeted it just 2 seconds ago. I might pick the Steelers' last two opponents to be the Super Bowl matchup. I think both these teams can win the Super Bowl and are both playing as well as they have at any point of the season. So these are elite NFL teams. It's not making excuses. That's who you're trying to hold up against, and they haven't, especially as constructed these past couple of weeks. I'm not saying that the Steelers season is shot, but they are a tier behind the elite teams. I think this is a tier 2 team. Now, their story isn't written yet, but this was pretty disheartening. But I also thought a couple mistakes by Wilson, we'll get to him in particular, or maybe you pick up one of those fumbles early, and this thing's a little closer and a little bit more, definitely is a lot closer and a lot more competitive. But hey, the Ravens made you force your hand, and that's what good teams do. Again, impressive win by them. Steelers are far from dead. They got kicked around pretty good today, but some things I thought they held up better than expected. As usual, let's run through these halftime stats, final stats, and then a bunch of thoughts. At the half, it's 17-10. And Lamar, who had a good game, of course, but was never a superhero in this game. They did a good job in, bottling him up for the most part, as they usually do. But at the half, he's 8 of 15 for 89 yards, 2 touchdowns, only 3 carries for 13. And Wilson, 12 for 16 for 110 and a touchdown, 3 carries for 27, but huge fumble in the first half going in, I can't excuse that. I'll get to some thoughts on Wilson here in a bit, but I don't know what you were trying to do to try to run the guy over at that point after a big play. Just slide, learn to live another day, and that was the play of the day. Certainly at this point at the half, but when it was all said and done too, that was the turning point because in the end, Wilson had those 2 fumbles and pick 6 that could have cost you 14 points. I mean, at a minimum, it cost you 10. So that's a big deal. At the half, Henry's ripping off runs. It's 13 for 75. Warren was definitely a bright spot, though. 4 for 25, 3 for 38. He's a receiving leader at the half. Flowers at this point has 3 catches for 37. Baltimore 2 sacks, only 1 for the Steelers. Steelers pass rush to me was concerning start to finish, really. Ravens led in first downs, 15-11. Steelers were 2 of 4 on third down. Ravens were 2 of 5. They had run 35 plays compared to 29 for the Steelers. Yardage wasn't that much different at the half, 201 to 170. Yards per play actually favored the Steelers, 5.9 to 5.7. Ravens had 121 yards at the half, though, rushing. Obviously a massive concern. But the Steelers had 75. If you're on pace for 150 rushing yards in a neutral script type game, you'll take that, especially for where this team's been. Yards per rush, they were at 6.8. Ravens were at 6.4. They were dropping off both teams were ripping off chunk runs. Steelers had 2 penalties for 20 yards. Ravens only had 1 for 5. Steelers had a turnover. Ravens had none, but they had 2 close calls that they kind of got away with. Good for them. Ravens controlled the ball for 16-24, and the Steelers were at 13-36 at halftime. A couple just notes I had at the half at the time were the Ravens fumbles that they didn't lose. Pivotal. I mean, that's big. Obviously, Wilson's fumble near the goal line. And, of course, the Ravens respond with a 96-yard touchdown drive off that turnover. So not only does the fumble cost you at least 3 points, maybe 7 in the red zone, but then they shove it down your throat, as good teams do, with a 96-yard drive off that turnover. My big in bold letters, Steelers secondary is in trouble, and Trice is getting killed. Poor tackling in back-to-back weeks. That's worrisome. And at the half, I wrote, never felt that Steelers had anything resembling control of the game, but run game looks strong and consistent for the first time in a while. All right, final stats are worse, obviously. Lamar, only 15 of 23 for 207, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Wilson, 22 of 33 for 217, 2-1 and a fumble, as we know. But Henry, 24 for 162 and 2 catches for 27 yards. Close to 200 yards of offense from King Henry. Warren, I thought, had a really good game. More of him, the better. 12 for 48 and 5 catches for 44. Flowers ends up with 5 for 100. Andrews, 4 for 37 and a touchdown. Austin was another bright spot as well. 4 for 65. He keeps stepping up and should be in the long-term wide receiver plans. No question in my mind. Ravens out first downed them 25-19. Third downs, both teams were only 4 of 10. Ravens only ran 62 plays compared to 60 for the Steelers, but they had 418 yards compared to 315. 315 yards of offense, though, isn't the worst thing I've ever heard from this group. Yards per play, though, obviously that's going to favor the Ravens heavy. 6'7" to 5'2". 220 rushing yards versus 117. And it obviously had to abandon the run late in the game, where they did not, of course. Yards per rush, 5'8" for the Ravens. But 4'9" for the Steelers. I've been complaining all week that Steelers are averaging 3.9 yards a carry. That's not good enough. Well, you got the 4'9" in this one against maybe the best run defense in the league. Ravens had 3 sacks. Steelers had 1. I'm shocked that number wasn't higher or better. For the Ravens, penalties have been a massive problem, but they only had 2 for 10. Steelers 5 for 27. That wasn't that big a deal. Turnovers, though, 2-1. And you missed a 4th down conversion. So to me, that's really 3-1. Time of possession, Ravens had the ball for 32-25. Steelers only had it for 27-35. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA and college basketball, NHL, to UFC and MMA. Head to BetOnline today to get on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, I don't have a whole lot at this point. I don't think there's a whole lot of intricacies to this game. But the season's far from lost. I have a very, very, very strong inclination that Pickens and company will be back on Christmas. Although I did tell you that, I think, going into this game. And I don't know... I'm not sure exactly how they're handling it, Tomlin in particular, but I think they're very much erring on the side of caution for these 2 games, with the knowledge of you still control your own fate, you're in the playoffs, and they would never admit these things, but being the 5 seed and going to Houston isn't so bad at all. And I'm not making excuses. I just think I'm trying to get in their head for big picture thinking in terms of playing these guys versus not. I really think they fear long-term injuries, and they want their best horses to be ready for this home stretch, these 3 important games, maybe more. What I mean by that is the 2 regular seasons and wild card weekend. But I did thought that they could hang with what I think is an excellent football team, despite being undermanned. I know the score looks bad, the end looks bad, but for much of this game, they hung. I never thought that the Steelers were the better team. I never did. We talked about this, and you don't need any kind of expert analysis to realize those 2 turnovers were probably the difference in the game. But not stopping Derrick Henry was also sort of important too. I mean, that cost them up to 14 points, along with that missed 4th down conversion. They didn't lose those 2 fumbles early. You know, they responded with the 96-yard drive. That's winning football by them. But I'm not making excuses for Wilson. I still have faith in him. But I think if you get into his head, who's been around the block and understands where these teams are and knows what is needed, I know that he could not have viewed this game as, I'm just going to be a game manager and not screw it up and we'll win. No chance. I mean, he probably looked at it like, well, I'm going to have to take some chances in this one. I'm going to have to be our best offensive player. Do I still have that in me or not? I don't know, but that's our only choice. And I didn't think he was super crazy, aggressive, bad decision after bad decision. Not at all. That ball was a little bit poorly thrown. I thought he was a little late on the deep ball to Austin on 4th down, where Hamilton made a nice play. Could have been PI. But he was a little late because Austin was open a smidge earlier. And the pick 6 was a little behind him. And it's a play that the Ravens have seen on tape a lot. But I'm just trying to get into Wilson's head that I don't think he's just going to be, I'm just going to manage this game and we'll be fine. No way. He's too smart for that. Bad tackling again, particularly on Henry. Not something they tackled Jackson really well, but the biggest problem was there were just huge holes. And obviously it wasn't goal number 1 to stop Henry, but this was way too much the other direction. You got that guy get moving through a big hole, and he ran through a lot of big holes. I don't care what defense you are. The same result is going to happen, if not worse. I've been really harping on the last month or so, too, that the Steeler cornerback situation, for now, big picture, first-round pick next year, signing Jackson or not, is very worrisome. I mean, Trice got thrown into the mix probably before he's ready, but didn't look good, on first blush watching it live. Pierre is what he is. He's a step slow. They're kind of fortunate that he's out there to even be involved, but he's a special teamer that can get you out of a mix at corner. And Porter is really the only guy you can have play man with. And when he was out, sure looked like the Steelers were playing a lot of zones. And Andrews and Flowers would just sit down in the soft spotted zones. Steelers would tackle. You couldn't mix things up. They need another man-to-man corner in a bad way. And they're not going to get it this year. I mean, that answer is not walking through the door. And always give the opponent credit, or at least evaluate them. They're really figuring things out. I mean, Ravens had that week 13 bye. Then they played a garbage Giants team. And since they saw the Steelers last, they have not allowed big plays at all. They didn't take hardly any penalties in this game. Those have been 2 of their self-inflicted wounds type of things. And they're healthy and they're fresh. And as I said, I think there's a very legit chance, and I might put $1 on it, that you see an Eagles-Ravens Super Bowl. I don't think that's crazy at all. Finding weaknesses on this team isn't easy. The Ravens are very well-rounded. They're well-coached. They're tough. They can run. They can throw. They got playmakers. And maybe the Steelers will see them again. Who knows? But it is what it is. It's not great, but I don't think losing to these 2 teams is terrible. You'd like it to have been a little more competitive, of course, in both these games. But you got a short week to flip. I would imagine you're not going to have Porter. Who knows? I think you will have some of the other guys, but that's not going to be easy either. But worst case scenario, you're the 5 seed. You go to Houston, and I think you can hang around. But I don't think you're clearly not a tier 1 team at this point. That's for sure. All right, everyone. Take care.